everybody, and welcome to A Dad, a Son, and a Game. Today we are going to review Gearworld, the Borderlands.
He's Luke, and I'm Joel, and we'll be looking at Gearworld, the Borderlands. Not Gearworld, Gearland, the Border Worlds, or whatever I was calling it earlier.
You called it the Border Worlds or something like that.
Dads are so dumb. Okay.
Math.
Gearworld, the Borderlands is essentially a thoroughbred horse that has tons of great characteristics, and it's said to be born of diplomacy. That the designers created it because they wanted to play diplomacy in one setting. It's also said to have been the inspiration for Settlers of Catan. The design team that was involved with this game also made Cosmic Encounter, and they also were involved with Dune. Both really classic games that have been reprinted and reprinted and reprinted and made better and better and better and are very popular. So essentially this game, if you just look at those things, would be an auto buy. I mean, it's got elements of Settlers of Catan, it's got elements of what was this, diplomacy in it, and they kind of marry together fairly well.
It's also, I would say, have a bit of war in it.
Yeah, some combat, the diplomacy part.
Risk.
Yeah, a little like Risk maybe.
Wrong game. I was thinking of War, the card game.
Oh, War, the card game?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's the part where you flip the cards in this and find out which one has a higher.
True.
You remember that part when you flip over the aces and... Yeah, I was lying. So that part's not in there for real. I just tricked my son. Here's what really is in the game though. This board is really a nice looking board. It's one of the better looking boards I've seen. It's got really great art that matches the theme. It's this cool post-apocalyptic steampunk world, and I really like it a lot, honestly. So then we have different things you can build. These little cardboard chips represent different things you can build. Like that's a bridge, and then you can also build weapons. That represents a weapon. If I can get my camera to focus for you. So toss those down here. Drive my camera bonkers. And there's a bunch of chips that come in this game, and they're just throwing a few of them down there for you guys to see. Essentially, the only types of things you can build, though, are you can build a weapon, a riverboat, or a skyworks, or a bridge, or a ship. And the bridges are only in 3 or 4 player games because you only use the islands in 3 or 4 player games. But then you also have these markers in the box too. These show which territories are yours and which ones are your opponents, and are very handy, very useful for having in the box. Keep things nice and organized. They look a little better than Risk minis, but they're not something you're going to want to paint or anything. They're not very quality plastic. They're just kind of cheaply made. Not horrible, not great. So that's those little minis. You also get green and blue. Here's where the game gets kind of interesting, is when you use these little chips to mark where the resources are produced on the map. So you figure out your turn order, and then you place these two-sided chips on the map. Now this chip I'm showing you produces horses. So what we're going to do is we will, not randomly, you'll choose in player order where you want to place those chips face down on the board. And then after you place all those chips face down on the board, then you're going to place your markers to show, I mean, it's a lot like Risk. You're going to place those chips there, and then you'll place your markers to say which territories are yours. And then after that's done, then you're going to go ahead and flip all those little chips over, and you'll figure out which territory produces which product. So this one here produces horses, and you would know then basically if it's producing either iron or scrap, or if it's producing horses or gold, are the 4 kinds of resources in the game. And I'll show you those little chips here in a second, so you get an idea. But this board has all kinds of really interesting shaped territories. It gets a little confusing to see which ones connect to which at times, but it just requires a little bit of a level of concentration. So there's a horse token that you get that's produced by that horse resource there. And other resources in the game include scrap, so that's some scrap that you get that comes from the areas that produce scrap. That is coal. Oh, you've got to have coal. I forgot coal. Steampunk requires coal for sure. And then there's iron, and the last one is gold. And gold's kind of a wild card, and here's our gold token. Gold is a wild card almost, or you can kind of use gold instead of other things to build your structures, some of your structures. So it's pretty valuable. And so basically there's several phases in this game. You start off with a building phase, and the building phase is when you're able to turn resources into weapons or boats or different things to transport goods better. And then from that you go into a production phase. And the production phase is where if there is no resource of the type that that land produces, you produce one resource there. So if you've moved the resources out, you would get a resource in those areas. And then the next thing is you would trade. Before I get too far with the phases here, I need to talk about the idea of dynamic phases. That's something interesting in this game too. You roll a die before your phases, and that determines if the phase is going to occur or not. So if you roll a 1 through a 4, then that phase happens. If you roll a 5, then it does not happen. And a 6, it's your choice as the person who rolled the die, and if you're going to do that phase or not. But then you go into, like the trade phase is also dynamic, so is the production phase. So the phases all kind of happen based on the roll of the die. And you want to trade a lot, because if you trade, you get to place your resources wherever you want. So you can move things around very quickly using your trades. The stupid camera won't focus very well for you. I'm sorry about that. But as the game goes on, you can then teleport your items, and you can always walk items one colony away or territory away. But you're going to want to eventually build river boats, which can travel through this river in the middle of the board, or ships that can go around the outside edge. And that's going to move your resources much more quickly. Horses right off the bat, can move things too. And they also contribute to military power, as do the river boats and ships. So that's what you're building when you do that. And then the transport phase is when you do move those items. And then you finish off your turns with a battle phase. And the battle phase is where this game sort of loses me a little bit, because the battle phase is when basically you calculate, you tally up power, and then whoever has the most power wins. There's no cool mechanic on that or anything. And so basically this game, though, is going to be totally different with 3 players. You're going to get into that diplomacy type game where people can lend their support to one side or another. And that does get better with 3 or 4 players, because there is a little bit of that pandering to each other to try and get someone to join you in battle or not join you in battle, kind of like in diplomacy. And so that does make the game a little better, but the overall battle mechanic is very dry. There's not a whole lot to it. There is no die, and there's no luck to it either, which a lot of people will like. The luck-free battle is kind of cool. That's about this game. I guess we'll go ahead and do our review in 2 parts. I'm going to let Luke tell you just kind of what he thinks about the game, the art, and everything on it, and give you his impressions of it, and why he thinks the way he thinks, and I'll tell you my thoughts on it.
I will have to give it probably a 10 on art. Skipping right to art, because the art is amazing. For actual fun and the gameplay, I'll have to give it 7, 7.5 probably. Because it can get a little repetitive if you don't start building new things. So
Are you done?
Just
what about complexity?
Well, yeah, complexity I'll have to give it probably a 9.5. 9, because you have to learn how to do the war, the building,
trading,
the material, yeah, trading,
transporting the goods.
Yeah, very complex. And my dad said that you probably won't know completely how to play at the end of this video, but you'll at least have a pretty good idea because it's so complex.
Yeah, it's not horribly complex, but I think the word I would use is fiddly. Are you done?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to give you my thoughts on the game too, which are a little different than Luke's. I think this game is really, really good. I think it's really just a great game, but it suffers from the fact that it is an old mechanic, it's an old game that has been updated somewhat thematically, but I don't know that the rules are much different, which for some people is a great thing. They thought, hey, Borderlands, that's a great game, I'm going to get this one too. But for me, it doesn't really do it for me. It feels like you're pushing cardboard bits around, stacking them up real tall. And then the combat isn't really that exciting. It's just kind of like, oh, we have more of this than you have of that.
Yeah, I feel like it's... Even though I've never played Dungeons and Dragons, I've heard podcasts about it.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like a less imaginative version of that, and just kind of a dull version. Like the war in there, kind of.
That's an interesting... Well, I guess the steampunk thing you could do in Dungeons and Dragons, couldn't you?
Well, no, I'm not talking about the theme. I'm talking
how they calculate it all up, and
yeah.
you say this number's bigger than this number, so... But even then, in Dungeons and Dragons, they have dice. And this doesn't have any dice in it. It has a die in it that determines if you're going to do a phase or not. That's it. The combat's all figured up mathematically for who has the most support, who has the most troops, which is where the diplomacy thing comes in. And some people love that, and I don't think it's bad, but I don't know, it doesn't click with me. It's not a bad game. It's certainly not a bad game. It's just not my kind of game. So I don't think that I'm going to be playing this one much more. And as far as the art goes, it is amazing. I think you gave it a 10 out of 10 on art. I would say, yeah, a 10 out of 10. But the fun of the gameplay, it's just very dry, and I don't know, I keep looking at the game over here, I'm sorry. It's very dry and very...
I have two things to say, actually.
Go ahead.
The art, I think I know what you're trying to say, like the theme almost, is kind of dull. Like... What do you say?
I think the theme is okay.
It's a little gloomy.
I think the theme is actually good, but I think the...
Not the theme, but the artwork is kind of gloomy.
Well, yeah, but that's kind of the style. I think it's supposed
True.
to look kind of gloomy. I think the mechanics, what I don't like. I think how it's like kind of just dry. There's no luck in it. There's no adventure in it. It's just kind of a, well, we're going to push our chips here, you push your chips there, and let's see who has chips left.
But, I feel like if you like the war type games, like Risk and maybe, let's see, what's it called? Memoir 44.
Memoir 44?
Well, yeah, that too.
Yeah, if you're a big war gamer, or if you're a big fan of diplomacy, this is probably a good game for you. But the other thing too is my personality, like just the way how my personality is, I'm not a super confrontational person, and I like to just play socially and make friends and make everyone happy. I feel like in this game you're going to hurt people's feelings and people are going to get mad and upset. And that's okay. Yeah. If that's the kind of gaming group you're in, that's fine.
I will have to give it probably a pretty low 4.
A 4 for families? It's a little tough to teach too. I mean, it's tough to learn. The rulebook's pretty good for a fantasy, for FFG. It's a pretty good rulebook, really. But
for age rating, I would honestly have to give it maybe a 10 or 11 and up. Because even I didn't really understand it, so. Yeah, and the other thing too is it kind of seems silly. There's a victory condition you can have in there, where you build 3 skyworks, and then you end up winning the game. Well, you can build 3 skyworks way cheaper than building ships and things like that you need to really be an important combat player. Right. So I mean, maybe we're just playing this thing wrong. If we are, leave comments and tell us, hey, you're playing it wrong. Here's how you should play it instead. But for my personality and for what I enjoy in games, it's not necessarily what I want. Also, I think it was the steampunk theme that kind of brought me in. I bought this on the same day as I bought Kings of Air and Steam. And for me, Kings of Air and Steam is a much more rewarding play. It's more fun. There's some competition between players and interaction, but it's like you control your own destiny a little bit. I do have a bit of a strategy, because you can take over land and their factories. But if somebody takes over this material and you need to just build 1 more skywork, I would recommend getting gold, because you can use gold for it too. Yeah, he's probably going to say that. He kind of tricked me. I mean, he beat me because he just snuckily... I was trying to go with a way deeper strategy where we were going to go head to head and fight, and I had this really great army all built up that I was just going to wipe him out. Yeah, and I used materials for 2 of the skyworks, and then he took 1 of the materials I needed. So I just ended up getting gold. Yeah, I was like, well, if I take over all the steel, was it, or something, he can't build a Skyworks. Well, he figured out he could build it with just gold. So he beat me. He snuck a victory out. So that's how he beat me. And then as far as playing with 4, that's never happened for me. This is definitely a totally different game with 3 players than 2. With 3 players, there's this thing where you can have somebody jump in and give you support to help take out another army, and that's where people's feelings, I'm thinking, are going to get hurt, and
friendships will be broken, and again, this is a diplomacy thing, and some people love that. They love to have, you know, fist fights at game night, I guess, but that's just not me. So as far as my overall feel for this game and my closing remarks on it, I guess, are I have a lot of respect for this game. The designers are amazing designers who've come up with some great games, and this game's inspired other great games, but I don't have a ton of interest in playing it that much more. It's just not my kind of game.
Yeah, definitely not one of my best reviews. I think it's actually the worst rating I've given a game, probably.
A 7.5.
Well, 4 for family too.
Yeah, it's not a good family game, I wouldn't say.
Unless you're playing with other neck-to-neck gamers that are like...
In your family?
Well, yeah, I guess you have a point there.
Yeah. But they'd have to be in your family. And then even then, you'd have to make sure that your relationships in your family are healthy enough that you can withstand a pretty cutthroat and brutal game. So, that's it. That's Gearworld, the Borderlands. We probably got things wrong. We probably rambled too much, but there aren't any other videos up of this yet. So, hopefully you can get a feel for this game based on this.
There probably is like one, but...
Yeah, where they dump all the components out, kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's the only one I could find. So, at any rate, it's not a bad game, but it's got to be the right game for you, and it's not necessarily the right game for me. And that's the bogus thing about these reviews, all of them, is that I don't care who it is doing the reviews, if it's Ryan, Tom, whoever from Dice Tower, or you know, the Sit Down, Shut Up guys, or the Secret Cabal guys. Unless you know if you like the same kind of games as them, their reviews aren't going to matter that much to you. And so, like, you guys really don't know me that much, and you don't know my kinds of games. You can see some back here behind me, I guess, but, I mean, like, I don't know, really make a choice up for yourself. And, I mean, this game's pretty brand new as far as the reprint goes. Maybe it is something you like, and I'm stupid, but for me, it's not my favorite thing.
Although, people may get to know us better in our further episodes, so in the future, if you're looking at this episode... like a year at 2014, because it's only summer in 2013. So.
Maybe you will know us better when we watch this video if we have like 800 videos up by then.
Right.
I don't think we'll have 800 videos up.
Maybe in 3 years.
Yeah, the next videos we're going to do is Luke's top 10 favorite games. My #1 favorite game is Candyland. I love Candyland. So if you like Candyland, buy this game.
We should do a like top 10 favorite game video. That's like a special video, maybe.
There you heard it. Maybe our top 10 favorite game video will come out pretty soon.
Yeah.
Alright, well, hey, thanks for watching, guys. We'll talk to you later. Bye.
Seriously, don't you think that's kind of a good idea to do a top 10?
Yes, and good job not puking this time. We're wasting tape, Dad.
Tape? Oh.
Okay. Ready? Do 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 do.